All right. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We will be taking questions at the end. So instead of putting it in the chat, if everyone can put it in the question and answer, the Q&A section, we have allowed upvoting. So if you see a question that you like, we're going to take at the end the ones that have the most votes. So please, feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A and vote for them. Like I said, we'll address them at the end. Right, and it's 5 after, so let's get started. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for the Death of the Product Roadmap here. We are so excited to join you. We've been working on this for a while and excited to bring some of these tools and tactics to you today. So let's get going. Awesome. So we do see some familiar faces in the crowd, but if you don't know us, we have today here Colleen Johnson, who's the CEO of Pro Kanban. Pro Kanban, for those who don't know, is an inclusive Kanban learning community. She'll explain a little bit more around Pro Kanban in a minute. We have Alex Priestley, who is a product leader, a Pro Kanban trainer, and a flight levels coach. And then I'm Laura Pozzi. I'm the head of product here at Crafted. I am a startup mentor and a big chai latte enthusiast. If you have any cafe recommendations, it's my favorite thing to do whenever I travel. So we'll introduce our companies first, and then we'll get into it. So like I said, I'm the head of product here at Crafted. We are a product development consultancy that partners with companies of all sizes to deliver custom software. So we really believe in continuous collaboration, balanced teams, Kanban, and flow. And we see tangible outcomes within 30 days using those best practices. Which obviously impact aggressive growth targets. So we're excited to be here and partner up with Pro Kanban on a lot of these best practices that we so heavily believe in. Colleen, do you want to introduce Pro Kanban?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So prokanban.org is a community focused on making learning Kanban easy and accessible. We have over 10,000 global members, including I think we're a little over 1,500 folks now on Slack, which is open for anyone to join. We do offer training, certification, and learning materials. We have over 130 trainers in 35 different countries offering classes in over 20 languages. Our goal with everything we do is to make Kanban simple and easy to apply to whatever you're doing. And we want our focus to always be people at the heart of everything we do. So thanks for joining us today. I'm going to hand it over to Alex next to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. And thanks, Colleen. We are going to actually play a bit of an exercise first, something called Wordle, which I'm hoping a number of you have heard about. And if you haven't, that's okay. Let me explain the rules to you just briefly. Basically, we get 6 chances to guess a 5-letter word. And these are the rules. The word that you need to guess needs to be a valid English word. And so what you get presented with up front is a blank grid. And what you're looking at here is a completed grid. This is where we need to get to. So by the 6th chance, ideally earlier, we need to guess the 5-letter word that's in the Wordle machine. And in this case, it's the word teach. Things that we can't guess are offensive words, acronyms, proper nouns, names, those sorts of things. So what we do on each round, and we get 5 letters for each round as mentioned, is that you guess the word. And what Wordle does is when you submit the word, it reveals that word, but with colors. Gray means the letter doesn't exist in the word. Yellow means that you've got the right letter, but it's in the wrong place. And green means you've guessed the letter in the correct position. So as you can see from the grid here, we're trying to guess the word teach. Now, we don't know that up front, but we're trying to guess the word teach. And the person here has used the word crown to start with. And the only letter that we get in the word crown that's in the word teach is that letter C. That's why C is yellow. It's telling us it's the right letter in the wrong position. And the other 4 letters are grey, so the wrong letters. And so as we go through, Wordle will keep giving us those clues and help us hopefully towards getting that word teach. Now, I'm not just going to sit and play Wordle with you. If you would like to play along, I've got a QR code or a bit.ly link up there in the top right. I've also got Sydney, who's going to join me on the virtual stage here, and we're going to play Wordle together. And if you're thinking, what on earth are we doing? I joined here to find out about roadmaps, not play Wordle. I promise you, just bear with us for about 3 minutes. All will make sense. With Sydney, I'm going to give you one additional rule. You only have 3 minutes. That's your time box. So, can you see my Wordle screen here? I think you can. Great. I'm going to look over here on my other monitor. You're a Wordle enthusiast, I found out just before, but you haven't played today's Wordle, so you don't have an unfair advantage.
Correct. And I normally take longer than 3 minutes, so this will be a challenge.
Let's see if you're right to meet it. As you're going through, just help the audience who may not have played Wordle before, just to give us a little bit of your thinking as we're going through. So obviously we've got a kind of blank grid here. How do you usually start? Do you have a preferred strategy? Is there a word that you quite like using?
There is a word that I always start with. It's great. Great. Because I get a lot of vowels. I get the T normally. We'll see.
Right. Shall I hit enter? Okay.
Nice.
So I think Sydney knows this, but for those of you that don't, so G, E, and T are grey words here. Letters, sorry, grey letters. So they're not in that final word. We've got R in the right place. A is the right letter, but in the wrong place. What are you thinking, Sydney?
Okay, so I know that the R is the second, and I want to try. I know there's no E in the word, but I need to try to eliminate some other letters. So I'm going to try the word brave. Brave.
Nice.
Hit enter. You want to commit?
Yep, let's commit.
Boom, look at that.
Wow, that was lucky. But now I'm like,
Are you
what the
sure
heck?
you didn't do it today?
I didn't do it, but now I'm like, what's another word that's BRA?
Oh, we
I'm
have
getting
some
some help from the
you're getting
audience.
help,
Thank
yeah.
God. Okay, thank God. Thank you, John. Brain. Love it. Let's do brain.
Bit like that.
Yep.
Hit enter.
Ooh.
Oh no, John. Okay. There's no N. It couldn't be brand. Oh, wow, everyone's fast. I love it. Brass, a double S. That's risky because
Or
you get the
brash.
2 S's. Yeah, brash. Let's try brash with a SH at the end.
Love it.
Oh no, and maybe it is brass. I think it's brass. BRASS.
Oh,
You did it.
wow.
Virtual round of applause for Sydney. You did it in five goes.
Well,
Actually, didn't
thanks
start the
to a
timer.
lot of help. Thanks to a lot of help.
I didn't start the timer. So I'm going to guess we did it in 3 minutes or less. But let's have just a bit of a debrief, if that's okay. Just a little bit of a conversation around some of these questions. The first question, why did you not guess the answer in the first attempt, do you think?
Because I've only ever done that one time in my whole life, and it was by chance. But it seems impossible. There's thousands of words that are 5 letters, so it seems impossible to guess in the first chance.
Can I just ask the fact checkers not to check this fact, but I understand, I think it's something like 1 in 12,500 chance of guessing it on the first attempt. Now, I think that's right, but some of the fact checkers might be on there checking that out, but it's extremely unlikely anyway. So if you did guess it that one time, probably you're not going to guess it again for a long time. So the odds were stacked against you. This might sound like a bit of a funny question. Did you plan out all 6 words up front and just execute against that plan regardless?
Definitely not.
And why not just talk us? Just what that sounds ridiculous, but why is that ridiculous?
Well, your choices have to change every layer because it depends on how many letters you get right or if they're in the right or wrong place. So every guess, the next guess, your choice is going to change in your head based on what the outcome was of the first guess.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Just talk to me about things like constraints and the things that you did know. What were some of the things against you or for you as you were kind of making those choices?
Well, you kind of have to think logically, like R was the second letter. So that narrows quite a lot of letters to be the first letter because it has to be something that goes along with R. So you've got to know the English language, how words are spelled. And there's not every single letter can be a first letter with the second letter of R. So that also kind of helps narrow down the different choices that you have. And it, like you said, it constrains you from picking just any letter. Like I can't pick the word, what did I start with? Great. And then all of a sudden go to, and like today when there was an R as a second letter. So it definitely starts narrowing it down for you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you said this up front, but you quite like the word great because I think you said it hits a few vowels and hits an R and a T. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, because, and I wish I had one with an S because I think like S and T are very common letters
Okay.
in the English language. So I always try and then you always want to get the vowels out of the way.
This would be a fair statement to make that even though you had no real knowledge up front and a ton of constraints, there were some things, some parameters, some good guesses that you could make up front to help you just get going. And the best thing that you wanted to do was say, okay, you know what? There are some things I do know. Let's just get going, and this is my best guess.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Sydney. That's much appreciated. Another round of applause for getting it in
Thank you.
five rounds there. Why are we playing Wordle? You're probably thinking. Well, simply put, we play Wordle like we live our lives. Unfortunately, though, we don't often do product management in the same way. And what do I mean by that? Well, in Wordle, we didn't have unlimited resources. So as you saw Sydney there was a fixed number of turns. So unless we work for big, rich companies with deep pockets, or we work in a market that's unlikely to be disrupted, most of us don't have unlimited budgets. And even if we do work for big, rich companies, we still don't usually have unlimited budgets. We're working in a world with limited resources or limited turns. We also had a time limit. So we often work in a context where we need to make decisions quickly and we need to get things out to market quickly because we live in a world where competitors would be very happy to take our customers if we don't move fast. And Sydney didn't know where to start in some ways. So there's a favorite word there, which is the word great. But often we don't know how to get going and in many cases where to go next. So if you think about just our decision making, we're often at a point in a process or in terms of product management in a place in a product life cycle. And the best thing that we can do is use information that we've got to decide where to go next. And that's exactly how we played Wordle. We got a little bit of information, we tested, we course corrected, made the next decision based on what had happened before. Effectively, we're testing the market or testing the water and then moving on from there. So we discussed this a little bit. What we didn't do was implement a fixed plan for all 6 lines and execute against that regardless. We didn't plan and replan and replan. Planning could only take us so far. And planning actually really in the initial stages anyway, really didn't help us significantly to move forward. So what we didn't do was go offline for a bit of time. We didn't take the whole team offline, say for 2 days to do something like a PI planning and try to plan our way out of that complexity. I think we know this, right? This all makes sense when we play Wordle or live our lives. And the big point I want to make here is that our product management practices often don't reflect this. Many people know this. We know this. Poker players know this. And there's a brilliant book by Annie Duke called Thinking in Bets. So whether it's Wordle or our product management success, we only really have 2 variables at play, as Annie Duke would say, luck and the quality of our decisions. Now, I think I'm a pretty good product manager, but even I can't control luck. The best thing I can try to do is to make those better quality decisions. And when it comes to product management, a key tool that we use to make those decisions, communicate a direction, or even try to shape the decision-making process is that product roadmap. And I'm guessing all of you would have seen a product roadmap that looks a bit like this. And the roadmap for many of us is a tool which is, I think, still being misused. So for many organizations, it hasn't made the leap into the 21st century, along with more modern product management techniques. We're still working with roadmaps that look a bit like this, but that's not surprising, to be fair, because when we start a piece of work, the first question usually that anyone asks us is, when will it be done? When will it be done? And more often than not, we're trying to answer that question using something visual like this roadmap. Now, lots of product managers don't like working this way, though I'm guessing if you're working with stakeholders across your business, probably your finance, sales, or marketing teams will love something like this. And the reason as product managers we don't like these sorts of roadmaps is because we know that these roadmaps really bear little resemblance to reality. We'll bunker down, we'll sit in a room, we'll take all our work, we'll stitch it all together, we'll try to make a plan for the next quarter or year. And we know within a week or two, they'll be out of date, things will have changed. And almost certainly we won't deliver everything we committed to at the end of the year, that we committed to at the start of the year by the end of the year. What something like this gives you is the illusion of control. And I think we know this, it is just an illusion. And great product managers have tried to move this forward. Because if you Google product roadmap, there will be other types of roadmaps that come up, lots of different roadmaps, and lots of different roadmaps that are used for different purposes. And so in the recent past, product managers have tried to bring their stakeholders and organizations towards more modern way of working. And I'm hoping some of you will have been successful in that, particularly if you work in an organization with a stronger product culture. I'm guessing many of you will have probably used something like the Now, Next, Later roadmap. One of my personal favorites is the Outcome roadmap. It's a Netflix style roadmap. What I love about this, it just frames the conversation around all the things that we should be talking about: business problems, indicators, solutions, or solutions we think that will work as bets, hypotheses, and therefore then the things we will do now and next, and the sorts of things we might want to be thinking about in the future. The reason I love this roadmap is at a strategic level, it ties all the right sorts of data points together into something really, really coherent. But, and this is the but, this sort of roadmap won't work for a number of your stakeholders because different people want different things from a roadmap. Now, I only kind of pulled this slide together in a couple of minutes. I just thought about some of my stakeholders and some of the things that they would want from a product roadmap. Likely you'll have more stakeholders, commercial colleagues, for example. And if you were starting to make a list of all the things that they would want from a roadmap, your list will go on and on and on. Now, you'll notice from this is that there are some crossovers, but there'll be some things that are unique to certain stakeholders. And one problem that we have with roadmaps is that they're not clear who they're for. And so often what we try to do is create a roadmap and we want it to be all things for all people. And often then what happens is that we end up pleasing no one, especially when they don't come true. And when we think about those sorts of fixed roadmaps we mentioned earlier, one issue that we're fighting against is a mindset which really doesn't belong in a modern product setting. And we call that mindset a deterministic mindset. A deterministic mindset. And a deterministic mindset looks at things as a single fixed path or an outcome. And it's an approach that typically models scenario or scenarios where the input values are known and the outcome is observed. Or to put it into Wordle terms, we make a plan and we plan out all 6 guesses and execute against that plan and see what happens. So just think about it in terms of risk management just for a moment, which effectively is what product management is about. And if we use Marty Kagan's risk framework, which is personally my favorite, As product managers, we're trying to create valuable and viable products that are valuable to customers and viable that work for our businesses. Throw in design and engineering, we also want to make them usable and feasible. And feasible in this context is having the right enabling technology and skills to be able to create that product. And a deterministic mindset does not help us manage these risks very well. And there's a number of problems with a deterministic approach, including the fact it does not consider the full range of possible outcomes and does not quantify the likelihood of each of these outcomes. Consequently, deterministic scenario planning will probably actually, in fact, underestimate the potential risk. This roadmap is an entirely deterministic view. So if you create this before the start of the year or at the start of the year, as I said, it's like playing Wordle, creating that big plan for all 6 rows and executing against that plan. So if this type of roadmap really is the commitment or a signal of that commitment, it leaves us very, very little wiggle room when things change. And we all know they change. So instead of a deterministic mindset, we need to have a probabilistic mindset. And that is the chance of something adverse occurring. And in product management, that happens all the time, adverse things. And this method assesses the likelihood of events, and it contains the idea of uncertainty because it incorporates the concept of randomness. Now, we understand probabilistic frameworks. We understand random things happening in our world. It's how we play Wordle. It's how we live our lives. We're just not very good at it. And so let me tell you about one more thing, and I promise you, like Wordle, this is connected. This is the best supermarket chain in the UK, and it's probably the best in the world. It's called Waitrose and Partners, and it's part of the John Lewis Partnership. I'm a little biased. So let me tell you about something we've all done before, grocery shopping. And my question to you is, when do you ever say this? When do any of us ever say this? I'm going to the grocery store and I'll leave at 7:09 p.m. I'll buy exactly 18 items on my list. I have the fixed route around the store to pick up those 18 items. I will pay using 3 of my coupons, apply my loyalty card, and then pay using my Chase credit card. I will be back home at 8:03 p.m. This is a deterministic statement. Most of us do not think and talk in these terms. Doesn't make sense to. Because we know things can go wrong. Seemingly, random events can change our plans for better or worse, either on the way to the grocery store, at the grocery store, at the checkout of the grocery store. These are just some variables that could hit our plans. I've not even included the journey home. There's lots of other things. There are lots of other variables potentially at play. And we recognize this. We all know this because this is how we rightly think. I'm going to the grocery store and will leave at around 7 p.m. I plan to buy 18 items on my list, and this may change when I get there. I want to pay by coupon or card, though I'll have a backup option. And given the majority of the trips to the store took around an hour, I'll probably be back around 8 p.m. This is a probabilistic statement. We accept things that may not go to plan. There are forces outside of our control, so we need some space to rebaseline our plans in real time. In real time, should we need to. Because you have limited choices when your fixed plans go wrong. You can keep going as planned regardless. You can try to pivot towards something more valuable, which is what most of us do when we have those fixed roadmaps. We scrabble around, try to pivot, or we can just stop entirely, throw the plan out, maybe create a new plan, or just give up. So go back to our roadmap. We don't play Wordle by defining everything up front, and we don't make crazily definitive statements about trips to the grocery store. Why do we do it for huge and expensive programs of work like this? Just look at this roadmap for a moment and just think, what are some of the things that could go wrong? If you were to write that list out, it would be long. And let me just give you a few of them, because this is the reality of planning. Priorities shift. Now, as product managers, How many times do we work in a business where the priorities shift? Quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, hourly? I mean, for some of us, that's the reality. Our priorities continually shift. Customer feedback. We all need more customer feedback. I can't think of any product company that I've ever worked at that says we want less customer feedback, please. We want more customer feedback, and we want the ability to incorporate that feedback and take it into our product planning. Market changes, capacity availability, missed dates. So just think about that fixed roadmap before. One date gets knocked out, it knocks back the whole plan. Dates get missed. New strategic objectives, management changes, new objectives come in, OKRs, whatever they are. We know when it comes to planning, when it comes to product management, what could go wrong? Either everything or nearly everything, certainly. And therefore, we need roadmaps to reflect the uncertainty in our world. And without realizing it, some of you may already have the tools at your disposal to be able to create the right types of roadmap to allow you to do the right type of product management. And let me introduce you to something called Kanban. And I'm pleased to say that Colleen is here, who's CEO of Pro Kanban. And there's probably very few other people that are better qualified to talk about this subject.
Awesome.
Colleen.
Thanks, Alex. Well, let's talk a little bit about how Kanban can help here. And I think the thing that we really want to focus on here is the reality, right, that Alex is talking about that's often missing from these plans. Kanban's actually not a process or a framework. It is a strategy to help you optimize the flow of value using a visual pull-based system. And the concepts that we're going to talk about here become really important when we start to think about reflecting that reality around our products and our features and getting things to our customers quickly. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide and take another look at that roadmap. We want to give you a different solution here, that your Kanban board can be your roadmap, and not just your roadmap and replacing your roadmap, but a real-time reflection of where your work is at, how it's tracking, whether or not it's stuck or blocked, and really answering that super important question Alex mentioned of when will it be done? So let's take a peek at that roadmap we looked at here a few minutes ago. We're going to take this top section here, let's say these two areas of self-serve and mobile. I think, from a lot of the product roadmaps I've seen over my career, this one's actually pretty generous. There's some spaces in it that you often never see. But like Alex said, if we have questions here around what happens if one of these boxes is delayed, has an increase in scope, we get feedback maybe that something that's on here for Q3 may not be as valuable as we thought it was going to be as we approach starting that work. We want to have the ability to change direction. And we want to be able to do that easily, right? All those things that we just talked about. We want to get good at being able to pivot quickly. A common approach that Alex shared is this concept of now, next, later. Let's take a look at what would happen if we pulled these two areas of focus out into a now, next, later roadmap. So same boxes, same things that were on that roadmap are on this view now, where we can see that for self-serve, we might be working on two-factor 2FA and localization, right? And then we've got a couple things identified that we want to work on next, and maybe a few things that are either later out, maybe later into the year. I like to call that now, next, never, because those tend to be the things that just linger out there and we keep changing what's next. Any thoughts on what might be missing from some of this information that would be important to us? I think when will it be done is still very clearly missing from this. And I guess one of the bigger downsides to something like a now, next, later would be that it tends to focus more on when we're starting the work, but not when we're finishing the work, and not helping us manage finishing that work. And it's also still kind of locking us into some things that may not be relevant by the time we go to pull that work in, those things that are in that later bucket or never bucket, as I described. Let's go ahead and take a look at what this would look like if we tried to move this into a Kanban board. So you can see across the top here, we've just flipped the order of what we're talking about here so that the things to the right are moving closer to that done column, where now we're saying maybe we're building these things that were in that now column. They're in some kind of development status or state in our workflow. Things that are next, or maybe the things we're doing some discovery work on. We're trying to understand from customer feedback, customer interviews, data gathering. Are these the right things for us to be working on next? And then maybe there's things further to the left on this board that were that later column that are in refinement, where we're trying to define the scope of the work and get a better idea of what experiments we want to run in discovery. So you can see here, we've just taken that now, next, later and flipped it the other direction. And we've gone an extra step here in defining what these workflow states are. What are the activities that are taking place for these features in each of these stages of our workflow? Let's go to the next slide. So what we want to start to do here is focus on this visual pull-based system. There's a lot of things that we can't see on a roadmap. Is work blocked? Is it taking longer than we expected it to? Do we have too much work in progress? Are we at risk of missing critical deadlines? And the last one here is really important when we start to think how a pull system comes together is, do we have capacity to take on that new work? If you've ever worked in an environment where you're doing PI planning, I think one of the anti-patterns I see most often is that we push new work in because it's time to do planning, even though we don't have any capacity to start that work. And so when we talk about a pull-based system, one of the things that Kanban will give you with your roadmap is the ability to say, we're not going to figure out what the next thing is to work on until we have capacity to start that work. That capacity comes from managing the work that's in progress and getting that stuff over the finish line. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide here. This is where we really want to focus on how we can get all of those things, all of those visual indicators we just talked about, to be visible to us in a real-time roadmap. We're going to do that through our Kanban board. So let's take a look at how we can continue to evolve this roadmap. So we're switching up our column headings here to be activity-based things like in refinement, in discovery, and in build. These will be different depending on your organization and what steps your work items go through to move from start to finish. The other piece that's really important here is what's across the top column, and those are work in progress limits. Work in progress limits are something that help us manage the amount of in our system against the capacity that we have to do those different activities. For a lot of you that are probably in product-facing roles, there tends to be fewer product folks than the people doing the development work or the build work. And so what we often see is that there's a gap sometimes in this flow of work where maybe we have too much work in discovery and it's not moving through build fast enough, or vice versa. We don't have enough product people to do the discovery work to keep all of the work flowing to the development teams. What we want to start to do is say, how much capacity do we have for these different steps of our workflow, and then manage that through these work in progress limits. And if we look at the in discovery column here and we say we can do 5 items, we can have up to 5 items in discovery at any given time, we wouldn't be picking what the next item is until something leaves that column. So that's where the management of our capacity becomes really important, and this becomes a pull-based system. This is uncomfortable. I get it, because it's taking away that sense of control that Alex was talking about, right? I want to know exactly what we're going to be working on next. But the reality of getting good at pivoting and the reality of being flexible enough that you can fold that customer feedback into what you're going to be working on next means that we want to decide just in time what the next thing is for us to work on. Let's take this a step further. We talked a little bit about the concept of when will it be done? And the next thing we would want to look at on this board is, are we on track for hitting those dates? From a Kanban perspective, we use something called probabilistic forecasting that Alex teed up so nicely here to help us figure out the likelihood of hitting a certain date. And we may say that these dates, there's an 85% chance that we would hit these dates based on the pace of the work and how much work is remaining in each of these features and the past performance or past throughput of the teams doing the delivery. When we start to look at these, we can also start to color code these work items by how likely they are to still hit that target date. So things in green may be still on track for hitting that target date with 85% confidence, but potentially the confidence is decreasing on these items that are in yellow and even further in red. So what we're doing behind the scenes on these real-time projections or real-time calculations is we're running a simulation that's helping us figure out how likely we are or how much risk we have for hitting that initial forecasting date. Without going too far into Monte Carlo simulations and all the magic that's happening behind the scenes, this is a great way to start to shift the conversation around managing your work in progress towards risk. So if I were to do a portfolio level stand up with this particular group, I might focus here on the items in red because those are going to be the items right now that are at the most risk or have the most risk for hitting their target dates. Let's go ahead and see another view for what this looks like. This particular view of this is showing us a bunch of features that are in progress for one organization, their current status, how much work is remaining in each feature. And then you can see that, on the farthest right column, the likelihood of finishing that work by the due date. Then they're color coded here by low confidence in red, medium confidence in yellow, and then higher confidence ones in green. What this is doing and what's really important about this is that it's running all the time. So like Alex said, a lot of times when we build out our product roadmaps, we're doing that at the beginning of the year, the beginning of a quarter, maybe checking back in. It's kind of a 1 point. It's based on what we know at that point in time. When we think about probabilistic forecasting and how we can start to pull some of this data into our real-time roadmap through a Kanban board, what we want to do is run this all the time because that's giving us an opportunity to manage this risk. We can start to say, do we need to pull stories out of this feature? Do we need to pull, maybe we need to reduce the amount of work in progress for these development teams so they can focus on getting one of these low confidence items over the finish line. But having the visibility of this data coming in regularly changes the conversation for us so that we can start to manage that risk and take action on getting these things done sooner so that we're opening up that capacity to pick what to work on next. We'll go to the next slide. So all of these things can be done through your Kanban board, like we looked at here. It gives you the ability to prioritize just in time and make those decisions about what the highest priority item is going to be when you have the capacity to pull it. And that's that concept there of just in time prioritization. The other thing that becomes really important here, and you can kind of see from that other roadmap view that we were looking at, is sometimes you have your roadmap broken out here by skills or different areas of focus or technical skill sets for the business. This helps us also manage our capacity and demand against the skills and the availability of the different teams who may be pulling that work in. It's also going to help us with hopefully increasing our confidence around hitting deadlines. One of the things I think we've all experienced in this space is this fear around giving a date or giving an estimate, right? Because once I tell you it's etched in stone and we're going to be held accountable to hitting that date, regardless of how much more work we uncover or how many things change in our original scope. When we start shifting our thinking to this real-time view of the work remaining and how our pace is for that work that needs to be delivered, we start to have a different conversation, right? We're focused now, like we said, on managing the risk around these projects instead of having this fixed date mentality where everything may change, but the date will stay the same. All of this also helps us a lot with managing the work that we have in progress against our strategic objectives or OKRs, whatever your organization uses. And those things become also a really important driver in conversation. So that visibility to be able to say, we've got things that we're working on that are not aligned to the strategic outcomes we've laid out, or everything is lined up right now to one strategic outcome and not the other. Those are the kind of conversations that we're going to start to be able to have when we have all of that information in front of us real time. So how do we do this? How do we start to build out a Kanban system? The first thing you'll need is a clear understanding of your units of value. And thanks to tools like Jira, we probably all have some different language and different organizations that we've used here. But this can be things like features. This can be projects even. This can be epics, right? So what is the chunk of value that's going to move through our portfolio system here? Where does that work start and where does that work finish, right? We need to understand when work comes in and when work leaves so that we can start to track the progress of that work through the workflow. And then we need those workflow states. So you saw some of the ones we threw here that were like In dev, in discovery, those can be your workflow states. They're not always necessarily owned by just one team. There's often a lot of activities that come together for each of the different stages of your workflow. And that's where number 5 comes in. We want to be really explicit in defining our workflow policies so that we know what activities are happening at each stage of the workflow. Number 4, we want to control our work in progress. And that's really critical when we start thinking about how we create that pull-based system. We need to understand our capacity so that we can figure out how much work is an appropriate amount of work for us to have in this system. And a lot of times you are looking across departments to figure out what that capacity is going to be. And the last one here is super, super important and could be a whole nother hour-long webinar. It is setting a service level expectation. Your service level expectation is really just a number for your organization to know how long is too long, how old is too old. Think of this as your expiration date on your features or your epics. We need to know if something has been in progress, let's say more than 90 days, that needs attention, that we sound the alarm. We need to organize around that work and see what the problem is or why it's stuck. The service level expectation should be based on data around your past performance. And this data can usually be pulled out of any of the tooling that you're working with to help you figure out, let's say 85% of the time, it takes us 45 days or less to deliver a feature. That's going to help you figure out what that right number should be for your organization. And we'll go to the next slide here. This is just a few pictures of different organizations going through this process of defining their Kanban board for their product portfolio. So you can see here, there's different stages. These are all physical examples. And you can see some of the things that these teams have come up with around the different workflow policies that were true under each of these stages. I love that one up at the top that has the celebrate column all the way to the right. All right, and with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Laura to talk a little bit more about who these roadmaps benefit in the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Colleen. Awesome. So now we have the tools and tactics to actually be excited and confident in the roadmap that we are building. So often, we don't do this in a vacuum. Much of product management is stakeholder alignment. And so how do we take this awesome new confident roadmap that we have and really take ownership of it? Because I know in my past experience, I haven't always been the full owner of those roadmaps, right? I have people coming in and dictating what they want and what they need next. So how do we start to build that confidence with teams that we will be able to deliver what we're being asked to deliver? We can go to the next slide, Alex. So first of all, we have to put ourselves in the right mindset, and not surprisingly, just as if with our customers, we need to have an empathetic mindset. This is so important with our customers, as we all know, but also our teammates, right? As Alex said early on. Oh, and next slide, Alex. Sorry. Oh no, it's hidden. Oh, that's okay. Perfect. So if anybody's read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie says, success in dealing with people depends on a sympathetic grasp of the other person's viewpoint. And like I said, this is insanely important for us as we align with our stakeholders and try and bring people's confidence over to our teams to have this empathetic mindset. And as Alex said in the beginning of the presentation, everybody has their own reasons for the roadmap, right? He had leadership, marketing, sales, finance. Everybody is trying to just do their jobs, and we all need to be aligned around what is getting delivered and when, so that everybody can continue to do their jobs and meet their demands. And it starts with us and our roadmap. So like I said, now that we have the tools to actually have confidence in our roadmaps and switching from that deterministic to probabilistic mindset, now we can change the culture. Next slide, please. And it really starts on this foundation of trust, transparency, and collaboration. And this is a lot of what we believe in strongly at Crafted. So first, we have to build the trust. that means creating allies. We can go to the next slide. Creating allies in various departments, listening to their needs, understanding what they need, when and why. Again, we can't do these roadmaps and build product in vacuums. We need to bring in out all these extra perspectives so that we know that we're prioritizing the right things for the business. We as product managers are the voice of the business. And so understanding the business needs and listening and being empathetic to the team ultimately builds trust. Subsequently, delivering with that high confidence also builds trust. So as these supporting groups start to see that you're actually delivering more often, more frequently, and hitting those confidence levels, we start to build the trust there. Secondly, collaboration. We want to leverage internal stakeholders in sales, marketing, customer success, any of those pulls. As testers, bring them along in the process, bring them along in your discovery, really allow their voice to be heard as part of the business and meld that in with your user needs. That goes a long way in building those allies and making them feel heard. They also then are part of the experience and understand where you are, what is going on at any given time versus product development teams going away into a black box and sales, marketing, customer success, not really knowing what's happening at any given time until we ship something over the wall. So bringing them in as collaborators is another great way to kind of shift that dynamic. And then finally, transparency. This real-time roadmap is grounded in transparency, but really, as Colleen said, we love that one column with the celebrate. Share your wins, celebrate them. Really be vocal about what is happening from your team and all the value that you're providing to your business and your customers. That's what we're doing when we're constantly shipping valuable software. And this real-time roadmap really is a great way to highlight all of that and show that consistent progress. That again will go a long way with your teams. So finally, if we don't build the trust, provide the transparency, and collaborate with these teams, other teams are going to make assumptions. As we all know, assumptions are risks. And so if they're making assumptions because they don't have the transparency or the trust, they're going to fill in the blanks and they're going to start determining deadlines, arbitrary deadlines, and arbitrary product features. And really, they're going to start taking ownership of your roadmap. So highlighting and prioritizing this kind of stakeholder management, internal stakeholder management of building that trust, providing transparency, collaborating with them, and really highlighting these tools and tactics of the real-time roadmap give you the ownership and build the rest of there. So with that, if you guys like what we'll head into questions in just a minute. So I don't see any in the Q&A box. So if you have any questions, pop them in right now. And if you really like what you saw here today, we're actually doing some really cool workshops together, Pro Kanban and Crafted. So we're doing an in-person one in Denver, Colorado, October 8th and 9th. That's going to go through the flow, all of these things that Colleen really dug into in her section, and actually show you how to do that. So it's going to be a really fun 2 days. We have a couple of great happy hours, and obviously Denver, we're biased, but is a great city to come visit. So please take a look there. We are offering a promo code for the first 20 people that sign up, get 20% off of the ticket price. So really excited about those couple days. And then if you can't make it to Denver, there's an online workshop December 9th and 11th, 9th through the 11th. So please check both of those out. And we're excited to dig into all these principles even further. Awesome. Thank you guys. All right. I see a couple questions popping in. Let's see, from Olivia. She says, do you have insights for a roadmap or Kanban that is literally just starting, i.e., I can't do Monte Carlo yet, but I know the major work items?
Alex, do you want this one?
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? When you're getting going, you have all this expectation from these great tools. I think my advice is just get going. There's a ton of uncertainty up front, but actually you don't need that much data to flow through your system to start getting those insights, to start being able to leverage the power of the flow metrics, to be able to start running those Monte Carlo simulations, probably a dozen or so data points. So just start working on stuff. What we also say is as well is that this isn't a one and done. You're not defining your system up front and then just leaving it. As Kanban system members, the people working in and around the system, is that you want to keep making these improvements. So it might be that some of your policies aren't quite right. Some of your workflow stages might need tweaking. But the best thing I would say is start with what you know now, a bit like Wordle. There'll be something great probably that you can get going with.
Yeah, I love that. It is a great Wordle example too, right? You'll get some kind of feedback pretty quickly, what needs to change or be modified.
Nice.
And I
Awesome.
think this ties nicely to Jonathan's question. I'll take that one next. It says, what methods have you used for forecasting and what types of multipliers do you put in them, if any, to account for scope change or team changes? This is a great question too. We like to use Actionable Agile. It has a built-in Monte Carlo simulation, but you can do this in other tools. You can even do it in Excel. It's definitely not as pretty, but you can use it. And when you're using these Monte Carlo simulations, it's building these models based off of your historic throughput. And that throughput can be done a couple different ways, right? We can look at story throughput. We can also look at feature throughput and epic level throughput. So you can be kind of tracking the delivery dates on a couple different levels when we start talking about larger work items like this. But the key here to adapt or to reflect scope change, team changes, anything, right? Pace change, whip change, all of those are going to have an impact on how we're delivering. That's where we want to reforecast regularly. And so that tool that we saw that was the grid of all of the different colored rows of different projects and their likelihood of delivering on time might look different today than it does tomorrow morning, right? Something that was in green today could be yellow tomorrow because we've added scope or the team's pace has changed, whip has increased, right? All these things that are going to have an impact on our delivery. So what's really critical when we start to think about the real-time piece of this is that we're rerunning those simulations and those models pretty much every day as new data comes in, right? As new throughput data is available, we can rerun all of those models.
Very cool.
I was just going to echo, if anybody would like that spreadsheet that you mentioned, join our Slack community. Look up either myself or Colleen, and we'll happily share it with you.
Yeah. Ashraf is asking a question also about the tools to create the color-coded Kanban board. If you are using Jira, Jira or ADO, you can customize this a little bit behind the scenes. There's actually a blog post on the Pro Kanban site that just was published by Suresh, who outlines in great detail how to get your color-coded bands on your Kanban board if you're using Jira. I think there's some other posts available with that too.
Awesome. We have a comment in the chat from Abe that the price is in pounds with VAT. If we have a link for US dollars for the events, we'll just post it.
I suspect the online one, because I'm running that, is in pounds sterling. So apologies. That's my local currency here. But the in-person course is probably in dollars.
Yeah.
But Abe, if you reach out to me direct and I can drop my email address here, I'm sure I can help you out with dollars if that's for help.
Okay, we have time for one last question. They asked, some companies use the roadmap to figure out their annual budgets for third-party development team costs. They need time to ramp up new teams as well as letting go teams that are no longer needed. Can this Kanban style of roadmap help predict budgets?
I would say absolutely. It's probably a slightly different way of budgeting than you probably thought about it in the past, though. Instead of looking at a fixed budget for the project, we're often looking at run rates for the teams or for the program area, like you've defined here. So we would need to have an idea of cost and time, right? And those two things are going to help us understand how long each of these are going to take or what our budget would be available for, if we're working on a feature for 45 days and the team costs this much money that's delivering it, we can start to get an idea of what investment we're making based off of that run rate. It is a slightly different approach instead of thinking of a fixed budget around the scope, because we are leaning more heavily on the age of the items to help us understand the investment that we've made and the cost of doing that, of delivering that feature. So it helps us start to understand the investment and the potential return if we are looking at the returns that could be cost of delay. You can be forecasting things like how much you expect to make off the feature. But if we start to think about the the age of the items as our investment to date, that can also help us have that conversation around the budget. Anything you'd add to that, Alex or Laura?
No, I completely agree that it is a different way of budgeting. My sense is, and this, I've worked with a number of finance people over the years, they won't like this way of working because they like definitive statements up front. But if you work alongside them, they will absolutely know how much, for example, a sprint might cost because they'll know all their OPEX, CAPEX costs, those sorts of things. So you can very quickly start to, roughly initially, but you can very quickly start to understand how much does it cost to stand up one of these teams just for a day or a week or a sprint or a quarter. And then, you can start to approximate, well, if I've got an item here that this team or teams have been working on for, say, 90 days, I know how much people time we've invested in this. You can probably start to add in some platform costs. We do cover this actually in a bit more detail in the APV. Just to plug that again, we have a good section on how to do budgeting and understand really, we call it product economics, and communicate that back into the organization in terms that they can understand and use themselves.
Awesome. All right, I'll take the last question. We have 1 minute. How do you right the ship impacting organizational change to move your company to a product operating model that uses the Kanban approach can be challenging? Where should you start? First of all, I just want to acknowledge that transformation is hard. It is really hard to change a company mindset right off the bat. And so we always approach it the way that we approach kind of software development. Start with a small experimental team, get buy-in to run that experiment and prove the worth. You can then slowly start to iterate and bring in more teams. But you're going to have to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. You can't just kind of come in and change the organization altogether because it takes time and there's a lack of patience when it comes to stuff like this. So starting with a small experimental team and really setting expectations on, this is going to take some time. You're not going to see it overnight. Getting it right, you'll be able to then kind of iterate and go from there. Happy to talk more about that as well. Awesome. Well, we're at time. As Alex and Colleen said, feel free to find us in the Pro Kanban community, and please join us in Denver for our workshop or online in December. We really are excited to talk about all of this and would love to meet you all in various forms. So thank you all for your attention, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, guys.